When we learn about past operations within the U.S. government, whether proposed or enacted, it can teach us a lot about how they operate. No document proves this more than Operation Northwoods. Deep within the once secret files of the United States government lies a chilling document. This document outlines a plan known as Operation Northwoods. There's a reason our government classifies documents like this, because if the public knew the truth, they would be outraged. That's why I feel like it's important to speak about these things. The parts of history that I talk about are not going to be taught in any history class. But I feel you can learn more from these stories. You can learn patterns of behavior that can help you make informed decisions in the future. If you want to learn more about these topics, then I hope you will subscribe to my channel and watch my videos. I thank you for supporting my channel. This video will break down the document, including what proposed false flag attacks our very own government had planned. And in many cases, they would have hurt and killed Americans, both soldiers and civilians. We will also try to decide if the rejection of this proposed operation by President Kennedy led to him being targeted by his own government. And the proposals included in this plan will probably sound eerily familiar to attacks leading up to wars that we've had in our not-so-distant past, as well as current times. Operation Northwoods conceived during the intense period of the Cold War. The early 1960s were a time of great fear and suspicion. This plan reveals a shocking willingness by some to deceive the American people. Operation Northwoods was not a minor proposal. The core aim was to create a believable reason, a pretext for the United States to invade Cuba. This was a time when tensions with Fidel Castro's Cuba were extremely high. The plan involved staging fake events. These events would be designed to look like acts of aggression by Cuba. The American public would then demand action. Ultimately, President John F. Kennedy rejected Operation Northwoods. He did not approve the dangerous and deceptive schemes. When the documents were finally declassified in the late 1990s, they caused shock and disbelief. The shocking proposal known as Operation Northwoods originated from a very powerful group. It was conceived and endorsed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This body is composed of the highest-ranking uniformed leaders from each branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. During this period, in early 1962, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was General Lyman L. Lemnitzer. He played a key role in formally presenting this dangerous plan. The Joint Chiefs of Staff serve as the principal military advisors to the President. Their recommendations carry enormous weight in matters of national security and military action. The fact that such a group would unanimously support a plan involving self-inflicted attacks and deception against their own country is truly remarkable. In March 1962, General Lemnitzer, representing the collective will of the Joint Chiefs, presented the Northwoods document to the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. McNamara was a key civilian figure in President Kennedy's administration. The presentation of this plan was a formal step. It was a serious proposal for a covert government operation designed to manipulate public opinion and justify war. The Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time held a very strong anti-Castro stance. The failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion a year earlier in 1961 had only intensified their desire for more decisive and direct military action against Cuba. They believed that existing policies were not enough to remove Fidel Castro from power. The official document outlining Operation Northwoods bore a chillingly bureaucratic title. It was called Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba, TS. The TS stood for Top Secret. The document was extensive, providing various scenarios and pretexts. The central idea underpinning Operation Northwoods was the concept of staged provocations. The United States would secretly conduct acts of violence or apparent aggression. These acts would then be blamed on Fidel Castro's Cuban government. The goal was to create a wave of indignation. This outrage, both domestically and internationally, would provide the justification needed for a full-scale U.S. military invasion of the island nation. The document proposed a wide array of different schemes. These were not minor incidents designed to simply raise tensions. Instead, they were elaborate and often violent scenarios intended to be highly convincing and inflammatory. Each scenario was crafted to point an undeniable finger of blame directly at Cuba, thereby manufacturing a casus belli. This meticulous planning underscores how seriously the Joint Chiefs considered these options, moving beyond abstract ideas to concrete operational concepts. The primary and unambiguous aim of Operation Northwoods was to create an undeniable justification for a United States military invasion of Cuba. The Joint Chiefs of Staff believed that removing Fidel Castro and his communist government was a critical national security imperative. However, they understood that simply launching an unprovoked invasion would be internationally condemned and domestically unpopular. They needed a strong reason, or at least the appearance of one. To achieve this, Operation Northwoods focused on manipulating public opinion. The staged incidents were designed to be shocking and emotionally charged. The plan aimed to create a powerful wave of anti-Cuba sentiment across the United States. If Americans believed that Cuba had attacked U.S. citizens, property, or military forces, the public would likely demand retaliation. This popular support would be crucial for sustaining a military campaign. Beyond domestic opinion, the plan also sought to sway international perceptions. By fabricating Cuban aggression, the U.S. could portray its intervention as a necessary defensive action against a rogue state, thus garnering more international acceptance or at least acquiescence. Therefore, Operation Northwoods was essentially a plan to manufacture a pretext for war. The goal was to make intervention seem not only justified, but unavoidable. Section 5. The Cuban Obsession: Why U.S. Officials Targeted Castro. The intense focus on Cuba by U.S. military and intelligence officials in the early 1960s stemmed from several interconnected factors. The overarching context, really, was the Cold War. Fidel Castro's successful revolution in 1959 and his subsequent alignment with the Soviet Union were seen as a major strategic setback for the United States. Cuba, located just 90 miles from Florida, became a symbol of communist encroachment in the Western Hemisphere. The disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 significantly fueled the obsession with Cuba. This CIA-backed attempt by Cuban exiles to overthrow Castro ended in a swift and humiliating failure. For many in the U.S. military and intelligence communities, the Bay of Pigs was not just a defeat, but an embarrassment that demanded rectification. It hardened their resolve to find other means, even extreme ones, to remove Castro from power and eliminate the perceived threat. From the perspective of the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, Castro represented a dangerous ideological enemy. His regime was actively supporting revolutionary movements in other Latin American countries. The CIA was engaged in numerous covert operations aimed at destabilizing or assassinating Castro. U.S. military leaders, particularly the Joint Chiefs of Staff, viewed Castro's Cuba as a direct and growing military threat. They believed that Castro's regime posed an unacceptable risk to American national security, and that its removal was a military necessity, justifying even the most drastic measures. Section 6. Manufacturing Mayhem: Proposed False Flag Operations. Operation Northwoods involved detailed planning of false flag operations. False flag operations disguised the actual source of responsibility, blaming a second party. The U.S. government would carry out hostile acts, blaming Fidel Castro's Cuban government. This would create an illusion of Cuban aggression. Proposals included staging attacks on the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Another plan suggested a Cuban terror campaign in Miami and other cities. This could involve planting bombs in public places, blamed on Cuban agents. They also considered staging riots near the base gate, with U.S. soldiers appearing to be attacked. Another proposal outlined sinking a U.S. ship in Cuban waters. This act would evoke the memory of the USS Maine, a catalyst for the Spanish-American War. The Northwoods document referenced this historical event. Sinking a U.S. ship could be portrayed as an unprovoked Cuban attack. The document detailed a scenario to develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in Miami and other cities. These actions were intended to create a climate of fear and anger directed at Cuba. Section 7. Escalating Deceit: Proposed False Flag Operations. The proposed false flag operations within Operation Northwoods were not limited to attacks on military targets or creating general terror. Some suggestions were even more elaborate and involved harming civilians or creating highly dramatic international incidents. For instance, one idea was to stage the hijacking of a U.S. civilian airliner. This hijacking would be made to appear as if it were carried out by Cuban agents, further inflaming public opinion against Castro. The planners explicitly referenced the "Remember the Maine" slogan, indicating their awareness of how a single, powerful incident could galvanize public support for war. They sought to replicate that effect. This historical awareness shows a calculated approach to manipulating national sentiment. They were not just considering random acts of violence, but events that would resonate deeply with the American psyche and historical memory, making war seem like a justified response. Perhaps one of the most shocking and morally reprehensible proposals involved a U.S. drone aircraft. The plan suggested painting a U.S. Air Force drone to look like a chartered civilian airliner. This fake airliner would then be flown on a route near Cuba. It would broadcast a fake distress call, claiming to be under attack by Cuban MiG fighter jets. The drone would then be destroyed by a pre-planted explosive and the incident blamed on Cuba. Section 8. Kennedy's Stance, Rejection, and Consequences. When Operation Northwoods was formally presented to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in March 1962, he brought it to the attention of President John F. Kennedy. President Kennedy personally reviewed the proposal. Despite the unanimous endorsement from his top military leaders, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kennedy unequivocally rejected the plan. He was reportedly appalled by the suggestions contained within the document. President Kennedy's reasons for rejecting Operation Northwoods were likely multifaceted. He may have had strong moral objections to a plan that involved deceiving the American public and orchestrating violence against U.S. citizens or interests. Furthermore, such a high-risk operation, if exposed, would have had devastating consequences for America's international standing and the credibility of his administration. The potential for uncontrolled escalation into a wider conflict was also a significant concern. Following Kennedy's rejection, Operation Northwoods was officially shelved. It never moved beyond the proposal stage. General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who had signed and championed the plan, was not reappointed to his position when his term ended later that year. The release of the Northwoods Papers provided a stunning insight into the extreme measures considered during the Cold War. Section 9. Northwoods Legacy, a chilling reminder in history. The declassification of Operation Northwoods in the late 1990s shocked the public and historians. It revealed a disturbing capability for deception at the highest levels of the U.S. military. The plan showed a willingness to manipulate opinion through fabricated acts of violence. Operation Northwoods exemplifies the extreme lengths some officials would go to combat communism. Fear of Soviet influence and frustration over Castro's regime led to radical proposals. It fuels debates about government secrecy, ethical boundaries, and democratic oversight. It raises questions about trust between a government and its people. The plan highlights dangers when military objectives ignore moral principles. Operation Northwoods remains a chilling reminder in American history. It stands as a testament to the dangers of unchecked power and the role of civilian leadership. The story underscores the necessity for transparency and accountability. What we learned about this operation tells us a lot about current events. It makes us wonder what the truth is behind the wars our country is constantly involved in, and it raises more than one question regarding the assassination of President Kennedy. It's documents like this that helps raise awareness about our government's abilities and motives, so never stop learning and asking questions. The past will prove the future. I thank you for watching and supporting my channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, stay informed.